there's different angles of it. There's the non-believers, there's the skeptics that are open to it. So you've got open-minded people that are looking at everything based on the evidence. And then you've got the people that already believe. And then you've got the people that actually know. And that's the difference. And I think us as a civilization, the biggest problem that we've got to come across is the difference between believing and knowing. Because believing doesn't do anything. Believing is just, and it's okay to have that point of view, that reference, but that's what's got us in this predicament as a civilization, where we could say that these other forces, the lower light, I call them, have been able to manipulate, because we go by a belief system. We believe the Bible. We believe the Quran. We believe what the politicians are saying. We believe what is on the so-called mainstream media. But that's belief. They don't know. They haven't done personal investigation. They haven't got personal experience. And that's where I want the people to start looking at things, is doing their own research and going with what can be known. And it's okay to believe, and it's okay not to believe as well. But there's a big difference, because that blind belief is what's got us in this predicament as a collective and individually as well. Years ago, when I was first public about this, I was sort of thrown into mainstream media with this, and I didn't ask for it. It actually just happened. I was thrown on the evening news on the morning show over here called Sunrise, and I came to the conclusion shortly after that who am I to tell people what to believe or what not? I can present the evidence, but unless people have experienced something that's, we could say out of this world, or that's unexplainable by conventional physics, who am I to tell them what to believe? So what I would say is that we need people to be open-minded. Now, the flip side to that, which is hard, is that it does take years and years of research to put this together. Anybody that thinks they can fix this situation in 6 months will figure out if it's real or not. It's not possible. It is so complex and layered. And I think it's actually simple once we get down to it, but you need to be educated first on things like reincarnation, esoteric knowledge, physics, the physics that these crafts are operating on, which are mainly consciousness. We have got no reference point for it at this time. And so I would say that people just need to be open-minded and not to try and confine themselves in a box of yes or no, black or white, because the shades of grey in between that black and white are so vast that I know for myself personally that when I've been given information from these beings, some of them extraterrestrial, some of them are what I would call from the geometric light realms, just on the peripheral of source, and that would blow a lot of people's mind and going, what's he talking about? But when I look at the information or have received it, at times I haven't been able to process it because my level of consciousness hasn't been evolved enough to understand deeply what they're talking about. And then 2-3 years later, I put the dots together. And so if I'm going through that with someone that's well read on this situation and continuously to have experiences nearly every day, how can the average person possibly process this? Because they're looking at it predominantly from a nuts and bolts point of view. And this is where some of it is, but a large majority of it isn't. And that which is could be connected to the SSP program or, just exotic technology that we're working on ourselves. Some of it could even be beings living beside us. So there's this huge, when you get into this, I guess, this realm of this field, you could start off with UFOs. Soon that leads to ghost and paranormal activity. Then it leads to near-death experiences, past life reincarnation. It just goes on and on and on. And that's the rabbit hole that we all go down, I guess. Well, it's about upping our level of consciousness through the Earth human experience. And with that, it's very, it comes down to very basic things, which is brother-sisterly love, treat others how you want to be treated, non-judgment, love, compassion, love for the earth, animals, all existence, see creator in all creation. And so that is the basic message that it comes down to. And I think when you look at any experiencer, when they're putting out this information, when you, I guess, compact it and put it in layman's terms, that's what it comes down to. But we get caught up in a lot of the information in terms of, extraterrestrial races, what these other beings are doing and implementing in the places that they're at. There's so many different things that come with it, but that's the basic gist of the idea. And so she goes into the creation process, sort of the history of humanity and the earth and how we've got into the situation that we're in and who's orchestrating what behind the scenes. And also the war in the third book she goes into, which is the war on thought, the war on consciousness right now, and how these negative entities are actually helping us in a way outside the box to where they can no longer affect us. So like Albert Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created. Therefore, we basically have to rise our consciousness. And if we see what these beings are doing, the lower light, the archons and the artificial intelligence and those that are part of that network, it is basically raising us through the love frequency to rise above what's going on to where it uplifts our consciousness individually and as a collective. And the information also goes into how there is an ascension process. There is solar flash material that coincidentally I talked to Corey about that sort of matched up with him. And there's been a lot of commonalities with his material, Barry, James Gilliland and others that later has blown my mind to sort of go, all right, I'm not the only one just getting this information because, yeah, definitely. And I've got a lot of love and compassion for people that are waking up and going through this. I was actually alone for about 10 years in an apartment going through this. I lost friends, family thought I was nuts. I actually lost jobs because of this, all because it was all plastered over television. I didn't think and know of the implications. So I know whether people are in the spotlight or not, I know that these are very hard and trying times, but they've got to know that they will pull through. There's a reason for this. It's usually the waking up part is the hardest because people even watching this, wanting to go, I want to have an experience. And I believe that everyone's an experiencer, but people waking up, my message to you is be careful what you wish for, because when it happens, every single facet of your life changes, and it can be very hard for the first few years because basically it's like going to the military. You're going to be broken down and it's going to seem like, you know, people have suicidal tendencies and thoughts. They want to lock themselves up, depression, anxiety. What happens from all that is that you build yourself back up because everything that we know has to be questioned once you wake up. Everything about, you know, history, religion, politics. It's a very hard time. So people just need to know that they can pull through this, but it's definitely hard times when waking up. It's an amazing thing because it just showed to me, and I've said this to people that have misunderstood my information, this shows how beautiful existence is, that we do not die. There is no heaven. There is no hell. We can sort of manufacture those types of experiences when we leave, but when we do go back to source, and I know from experience when I regularly go there or through these geometric light realms on the peripheral of it, which is where a lot of the angelics and light beings reside, it is the most blissful state. And there is 360-degree unbounded awareness, and there is a symbiotic relationship with everything at once where the things that we question here that we want to know no longer exist in those states of consciousness because everything's just known at once. And that's the point why we left Source, was to glean knowledge and have experiences, and it had to be different for every single cell of Source so we could gain knowledge for the overall collective. And it sort of goes into this, I guess, God consciousness database where we do it all again but differently. That's part of it. One thing that points to the information being very truthful, especially from the angelic type beings that I'm interacting with and the Elohim, is that there's even mystery still to them about their existence and how all this came to be about. So if it was something negative or controlling, I would say that it would have an answer. They didn't have an answer for certain things that were, I guess, very deep interactions with them on terms of knowledge. So the beautiful thing is that we're not just not knowing certain things. A lot of these beings are still trying to understand things on a deeper level as well. What I know is that in between each lives, we actually know it all. In that state where we're not incarnated, where we are connected to, we could say, that unified field, we know all this anyway. So the thing is that right now, if you can imagine a basketball with the little area where you put the pin in to fill up the basketball, the best way I can describe it is that is all three of us and everyone watching this, this is our pinpoint of awareness right now. If you think about it, we're anchored into the human body computer and we're actually out there. We're not in this. We're actually connected to it. And right now, how we're perceiving things, experiencing things, even us talking now, it's with the pinpoint of awareness of that 360-degree unbounded awareness. And in that state is where we actually know it all. It's when we come in that information shown to me and revealed to me is that, how can I put this? A lot of us can't be blown wide open or know a lot and slowly have to understand it. Part of it's got to do with integrating the information, but also if we went from point A to point Z in terms of evolution here, we would screw things up. It has to be like part of a process of the collective and individual as well. That's why we can't know everything when we incarnate. I've got a lot of past life memories and knowledge as well, which are really same life, because reincarnation exists, but it doesn't at the same time, because when we look at things linear, it's true. And I'm saying that it is true, but the point where it's not is that what's been shown to me is that we're living so many different lives at the exact same time, though that's an illusion, that it takes that out of the equation. So the way I can describe this is sort of like the octopus effect, I call it. There's the head of the octopus, and then you've got the tentacles coming off. Now, each one of them could be living and experiencing a different existence at the exact same time. This is multidimensional mind I'm talking about. So when we're linear, it's very hard to perceive. Now, one of these lives could come off, and it could basically achieve ascension, and it could split itself up into another heap of lives, experience lives. This is where things are fractal in nature. And so this is where the information I've got can be very complex, and it's, you know, for people to do what they want with. But this is where it's like there's so much happening, because once you get to the God self, the Elohim self, all those cells are connected and everything's one consciousness interacting with itself. So it's quite life altering when you're going through these things as well, because you start to see the illusion for what it is. It's one thing to know, you know, we've got people like Elon Musk and all these scientists thinking that this is like a stimulated reality. And in some forms it actually is. Everything's like a part of the whole. But
not in the way that they think it is.
Not in the way they think it is. In one instance, what's happening is, and it's not the case, but there is parts of it that can have some truth to it, is from the information revealed to me, the fallen Elohim, which became the Archon network, which overshadow reptilians, Dracos, we could say parasitic thought forms, those that are in service to self. When they first fell and they wanted to stay here, they did create a multidimensional technology that mainly uses satellites, meaning moons, planets, and these things send out frequencies, and it's basically over time spread it out like a virus over the entire, not the entire universe, but parts of the universe, and they're all intersected to where we can't see the reality for what it is. And so there is an artificial intelligence that in some way is manipulating what this reality is meant to be to block us off from what's really going on. And this has been going on for a very long time. It reached our neck of the woods, I'm not sure how long ago, but I'd say we're going back millions and millions of years, because I know that the Lyrians had been around for a while, but the Lyrians started coming to Earth about 20 plus million years ago. And the first example of the Elohim coming into existence there was long before that. Because what happens is, as each planetary body or place, once it's got a evolved to a certain point to where it can contain life or hold life, what first happens is that the Elohim divide off from the blueprint and they manifest in the physical form, and they were nor male nor female originally. And so this is where there's a lot of information on the creation story, but the creation story is fractal. It's happening when places are right to have life on them. And it's not just a Milky Way galaxy, it's going way, way back. And I've interacted with beings that are, there's no time reference for how old they are. One of them's actually still in 3D existence, but he can go multidimensional. And this being I call the wise one, and he looks very similar to E.T. from the movie E.T., but with black eyes, a lot darker. He basically looks like he's got no mouth as well. And that being's job was basically to incarnate once, and that's it. He will never die until Source basically absorbs itself back in and redoes it again. And so the vast amounts of life out there and existences and what we perceive as our reality through, I guess, the manipulation of the artificial intelligence is just vast, and it just keeps going on and on. It just doesn't matter where I go, this phenomena and experiences continue to happen. I think some of it's tapping into naturally what's in those areas. Sometimes you've got inner earth beings or beings that reside outside of our frequency in certain areas. And then other times it's my crew coming in, picking up on me, or I'm picking up on them, depending on their level of consciousness and what technology they've got. This stuff happens. Italy, it happened. I filmed one of the best bits of footage I've ever filmed in Italy with a Japanese television crew that were there. And I basically told them what time, location, and direction this craft would arrive. And we got 20 minutes of, I got it on 4K footage. They got it on 3 different cameras. And this thing was like jumping a mile in a second and coming back. And we thought this was actually going to land. So, you know, that's just a place I've never been. I told them the time, location, and everything played out how it was going to play out, and that's exactly what happened. So I think that once you're awake and aware to a certain point, this is where you start to realise once you can work with your consciousness, you can initiate contact. And I'll say it's not summoning. People will say it's summoning. It's not summoning. It's more along the lines of when you put out an intention, and if you know certain beings' names or frequencies, you can tap into them like a universal phone number, just through thought, through consciousness. And so just like a friend would be like one of you calling up each other, ringing them up and going, "Are you available for a coffee?" You might be, you might not be. Same thing can happen with these beings, so they can transcend space and time. So this is where really now a lot of the work that I'm doing is based on helping people get the connection that I've got through self-mastery work. And what happens, how it actually works is when they send a thought like a data transfer, and it goes into your light body. Now, the problem is that sometimes some of the information will come 10 minutes, an hour later, or even more, but remote viewing, usually you're getting points straight away. But when it's very advanced beings, there's so much data contained like a book of information, it will sit in your light field, and then it will come down through the crown chakra, through the right side of the brain, decoded as it comes to the left. And you're left with point form, books of information or paragraphs that can open up. So at times, if I'm baffled by something and I'm not sure, I will remote view it. But a lot of the time I have an awareness of my own experiences and what's going on. Like me and James will be sitting there and we'll almost say at the same time the Pleiadian is about to come over when I'm sitting at the ranch, and bang, this craft will come over, power up, and completely blink out. Or one will say it before the other, but we're getting the exact same information at the same time. Or I can do this with John Vivanco and other experiences. But that's what it comes down to, is that once you get to a certain point and you've done a lot of the self-mastery work, and that's what I'm doing now, is appointments, helping people connect to their guides themselves. And I'll do like a reading at the start to sort of bring in the energies, hold the space. And then I can get anyone on the planet to do what I can do, because it's very simple and easy. And everyone can do it. You don't have to go to a psychic to get information or a remote viewer. It's good to get external information. But from my experience, every single being throughout all planes and dimensions can do this. It's just depending how you go about training and reconnecting to that, depending on the physical container, in this case being the Earth human body. So, yeah, I guess that was a lot to answer to your question, but yeah, we do remote view. But one thing that started to happen was that sometimes when I'm filming these crafts, and people can go online and see it themselves, I've sort of left some of the best bits of footage, but there's over 3,500 videos and photos that I've got. This will happen during the day or at night. In my mind's eye, or sometimes my visuals has blacked out, I can see me from the craft on the ground. Wow. So there's almost like, I guess, I recently started watching Star Trek a couple of years ago, and the best description would be almost something like a Vulcan mind meld. And this is what I interact with these beings. That happens when I'm on board the crafts or when I go to their planets or their bases. But it started to trip me out from the point of view it was unexpected, because here I am on the ground and I'm filming this object, and bang, all of a sudden I'm seeing what they're seeing on the craft, and I'm seeing me down on the ground filming the craft at the same time. Wow. And so you've got this split multidimensional awareness. It's mind-blowing. Some of these beings, when you connect with them, they can actually see what a whole suburb or a whole city are simultaneously experiencing at the same time. They could be seeing through both your eyes right now, everyone in your suburb. They could see everything that everyone's doing at the exact same time. But again, it depends on the level of consciousness, depending on what beings can do that. It comes down to a few things. Like, number one is, if they wanted me dead, I'd be dead. There's no problems with that. Yeah. It's like a couple of years ago, I was shot at from a helicopter in Yelm with a few witnesses that were present with me. And it was a black helicopter, well, sort of like a Black Hawk. I couldn't tell it was nighttime, but we could tell it was a black military helicopter. It was low just above the pine trees on the property that we're at. And yeah, you could see the sparks, the sort of the light flickering from the well, I don't know what type of guns they were. And so in that instance, if they wanted me dead, they could have done that so easy. There's been a lot of surveillance. There's been technologies found around my presence that point to surveillance. Strange cars following, strange phone calls, threats, you name it. And I think that's one thing where they knew that intimidation was probably the only way that they could go. And that's what they've exactly tried, is intimidation. The biggest problems I have, and I sort of laugh at those sorts of things, that scared the crap out of me with the attempted shooting and that, but it's the off-world attacks from off-world entities and the frustration sometimes with the people within our own community, which frustrates me more, because there is a lot of division in this community where I've received more attacks from that than I would say from Black Ops or whatever that is. But then the real attacks that are really hard to break through and that have developed my self-mastery is through what I would say attacks, especially from the Draco Greys. And these are small 3.5 foot beings that are the worst thing you could come across. I don't care about Draco reptilians. I've come across them. It's not a pretty thing either. But these little Draco Greys are very manipulative. A lot of people think they're having sleep paralysis when they're being grabbed or something in the middle of their back, jumping on them in the middle of the night. A lot of the times, it's these types of entities. And so these are the sort of the attacks that I'm mainly putting up with. And yeah, that's not nice either. But, what can you do to, what can you exactly do with it? That's the point from all this, is that, James Gilliland, one of my best friends, he's got the ECETI Ranch and I've got ECETI Australia because we've been working together. He's gone through a lot of similar things as well. And this is the stuff in the community that doesn't get spoken about much because people want to focus on the contact and the evidence and things like that. But this is the real stuff that all experiences to some extent. They're going through some type of these attacks or government or whatever organisation surveillance, or they're getting crap from the UFO community. And I don't care about the UFO community or the spiritual community. I want people to be focusing on the consciousness aspect, because that's all child's play as far as I'm concerned. It's interesting. It's a great to get an interest and open up your mind about these realities. But once you're at a certain level to where you're just absolutely past all that and you see a lot of what's going on for what it is, that's where it all lies on, is self-mastery and spiritual development. And so we have, if you look at it like this, guys, can you guys tell me how far we've come since Project Blue Book as a community worldwide in the revelations? The same theories Jacques Vallée and that Alan Hynek and all the old school researchers had, and not putting them down. Great work. I admire the work that they've done and how they've stood up for the community and what Alan Hynek did after Project Blue Book. But you tell me one conclusion that's new that they've come to, that community, the nuts and bolts ufologists, that's changed from then to now. It's the same theories, the same stuff. And nobody's listening to the experiences. And I'm not saying that people believe me. I don't want you guys to believe me. I don't want the community to believe me. That's the problem that I'm saying. We've got blind belief. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is you start listening to people like myself, Barry, James, Corey, and others, and you start to go, here's the similarities. You start connecting the dots, and that's where you can start to come to possibly opening up to those truths. Again, I don't want them to believe us. But that's what I'm saying, is that this is where it comes into, and we're the representatives of these beings, the ones having contact, that are happening in the way that they are for us. In some ways, we are their representatives because we're the ones experiencing this stuff and getting the information. And so a lot of what these secret space program, and I've had experiences with military, my lab and things like that, the technologies and the ETs they're interacting with are so low level. Their technology to us would look like magic, but on the scheme of the other beings that I'm interacting with, it's child's play. Like these beings go instantaneously think, and they're in their own Merkaba. and they break down to an electron and remanifest it in another electron anywhere in space and time through thought navigation, and they rebuild there. They don't have a craft. They can break down their physical or their light body, which is two and the same, as above, so below. They break down and bang, they're somewhere else. Yeah. And so this is the hard thing with me, is that the complexity and the advancement of the beings that I'm mainly interacting with are of that nature, which surpass when people are talking about little greys or beings from here or beings from there. Though I'm interacting with a lot of those types, these are the main types of beings I'm interacting with, which are highly evolved and advanced. They're swimming in the electrons. They know that everything's one consciousness. And so, you know, who's ready for that as well? Unless they're very well read up. Like Shiji said to me, those that are ready will come for this information. It's not for everyone. They can't absorb it if they're not read up, experienced, or open-minded. It's just not going to happen. I work with the King of Australia, Ulukai Brendan Murray, King of the Raven Tribe, actually, and talking to him privately, they actually, he released information through James and I before a lot of the Aboriginals were allowed to know it, which is the meaning behind Uluru, the big rock in the middle of Australia, and the Olgas, the rocks around it.
Yeah.
And the information that I had resonated with him, and he basically told me the same information, which was there was a huge Pleiadian influence through Atlantis and Lemuria, which were offshoot colonies from Pleiades, when they time traveled back for the inception of Atlantis and Lemuria, and they sent that rock here to smash into the planet and terraform it for life to start then again. And before that, we had reptilian custodianship for a very short-lived term because they screwed up. They were given a go, but they screwed that up. And before that, going back 500,000 years, were the Lyrians here, which basically Pleiadians, Orion, Sirians, a lot of us have their genetics offshooted from that. But as I said, the Lyrians had been coming here since 20 million years ago, and there was a few civilizations before even they were coming here as well. So we see, why I'm saying that is not even just with the original people in Australia, the Aboriginals, we call them the original people. The Native Americans, I've talked to Clifford Mahudi and other Native Americans or original people in America that have spoken about the Pleiadian connection. The Mayans talked about the Pleiadians being light beings. The Japanese did as well. We see this cross-correlation all across the planet. And where the information gets interesting for me was with probably between book 1 and book 2, there was experiences where I started to connect the dots through Shiji that I'm an actual offshoot of Shiji. Yeah. And that there's another offshoot of Shiji in the Pleiades. So there's a physical aspect of Shiji. There's a light being, so there's a 5th density version, a 7th density version, and then I'm a 3rd density version. But they also come offshooted from a rainbow light being in Orion, which is another aspect of me connected into the Elohim. And this is where it's like, I don't talk about this much because it's friggin' crazy to even people that are new to the community or been in it for a few years. If they're not read up on the consciousness aspect, they're going to go, this guy is a well-orchestrated schizophrenic. It just
they're gonna start accusing you of identifying as a woman.
yeah, which gets us on that whole thing, and I'll be in trouble with everyone and everything. So, this is where continuously for myself there is revelations about who I am as well. And it's more complex than what I thought it ever could be. I can remember before coming into this earth human body, I was given a lot of past life experiences and memories, and I can remember interacting with the Elohim before I incarnated here. And that's why I'm saying this, is because I can remember interacting with the Elohim, deciding to come here and help. And so there's been a recent experience which I can go into with the Elohim. Now, originally what happened was in a room adjacent to this room, I was in my bed and there was a golden orb open up and just come at me, and it was Pankei being from Orion that's actually in his Merkaba. He doesn't have a physical nuts and bolts or even an organic craft. He's in his Merkaba light body. And there's living light crafts and different types that we could do a whole show just on those alone. And so he came at me, I was engulfed in this orb, and next second I'm in, the only way I can describe it, now this happened, I think it was around the 8th or 9th of October. I think it was the morning of the 9th of October last month. And I'm in a place the only way I can describe it was like a cathedral, being inside like a church or a cathedral, but structured from light. And there was 33 representatives, including myself there, and we were overlaid with a holographic, I don't believe it was like a projection of hologram, like a hologram, but it appeared like a hologram, overlaying all of us. And it was 12 Elohim in a circle in like a crystal quartz cave, like a dome. And it was pulsating. And I've had a few experiences like this as well. And I've been interacting with these guys since 2011 and before, in terms of they started appearing as blue orbs and turned from these blue orbs into these 7-foot tall light beings. And so me and Corey talked about that. I'm not sure he knew about the Elohim, but there's not just one type of Elohim. There is different densities of them doing different things. Some of them look like they're structured from light and a humanoid, and he knew of one type of those as well. So this is where there's cross-correlation with Corey and me in terms of I've had blue orbs come up me and engulf me, and all of a sudden I've got a symbiotic relationship with blue beings in this craft that we're in. And I never spoke about that part of it, but I'd been writing about it in books for nearly 10 years, which anybody can go and check up, including solar flash material, which we can go into in a little bit. Now, during this experience, not just with the Elohim holographically over us, but there was what I call the Lords of Light and the Sisterhood of Light and the Brotherhood of Light, different, and there was even more than that, but they were like plasma light, ethereal type beings sort of surrounding us, hot, like meters off the ground, way up. And there was information showing that what's going on here is going on in other worlds. It seems to be more amplified on Earth. And that up until April next year, we're going to see a lot of things that have actually already started to come into fruition. Mass shootings, more of them. Political upheaval, especially with Israel, with what we're seeing them doing, closing down embassies, especially with America. There's going to be upheaval. Now, the point with all this too is that we're going to see civil wars possibly. And now everything that I'm telling you is not set in stone. They're energetically where things are going at the moment.
Sure.
People will go, this is going to happen on this date, this time. Since 2012, the timelines have come together to more of a create your own reality timeline. Nothing can be done psychically like it was before 2012 because this is a quickening happening. So we're going to see a possible sweep of major earthquakes across the planet as well. Now, this is a result from the sun doing what it's doing, because every time the sun's reacting, the Schumann resonance on the earth reacts, the tectonic plates react, and that's where we get volcanic and earthquake activity. Now, this is a byproduct too of seeing, I was told about typhoons, cyclones, hurricanes. There seems to be anything and everything we can think of. There's going to be an amping up of that at the moment. And this is going through until April next year. There was devastation, but it wasn't clear to me on how much of a scale, if not, is it for sure to happen. But there seems to be something energetically happening, that this is not just confined to Earth, this is confined to other planetary bodies in other star systems as well. There was representatives from completely different places that were being shown this information. And I call us the ERC, the Elohim Representative Council, because these beings are representatives for the Elohim who can't just talk to anybody and everyone, though if people listen to their thoughts, they're connected to it. That's your God self. The overall collective that you're connected to is your Elohim self. And so these are very highly advanced beings coming through at this time. So there's a lot of things that are going to be happening that we just need to stay in love and peace and manifesting from thought the reality that we want. We can rectify these things. We can actually have disclosure and unified consciousness overnight if we chose to. That's not going to happen. It could eventually happen once things were revealed to us. But for us to overcome our differences, our petty differences of, whether it's skin color, political beliefs or religion beliefs, whatever it is, these are the things that are holding us back, and we're made to happen to keep the division. So with the solar flash material, what I was shown, and I wrote this in a book, I wrote in Operation Starseed about, it was probably the first time maybe the Elohim holographically projected and manifested in my lounge room, and half of the lounge room turned into that crystal cave I was telling you about. And in front of me was holographic projections of who I am, who I'm working with, what beings I'm connected with, which beings are basically our opposing force, and what's going on. It doesn't explain everything, but up to that point it did for me. Now, it was explained to me through solar events that there was a lot of humans that died. And later Shiji mentioned the solar flash, and now recently she mentioned about a pulse coming from the sun hitting Earth and a frequency going back, and that there's an elevation of consciousness happening from that event. Now, from that time when they first originally showed it to me, there was a lot of Earth humans that did perish in that, but it was an ascension process, or they ended up going where they needed to. They hadn't evolved enough for ascension yet, but they incarnated somewhere else. Mm-hmm. The rest of the humans, a majority that were left on the surface, were picked up by Pleiadians and Orions in the future, coming back. And the rest of them went underground and over time turned into what we could call the grey aliens, connected to Zetas and Dracos as well, through genetic manipulations and through going into inner Earth through installations. And this has got nothing to do with the inner Earth beings. This is a whole different thing. And that some of those beings that went in, that turned into greys, eventually left Earth and put outposts out in other places, trying to rectify and come back and stop what had happened. So there is information that, looking back now, I'm going, geez, this is exactly what we've been hearing about, but I don't see this as a situation of all doom and gloom. Again, I wrote about this years ago. So there's people like Corey that correlate it. For me, that was a big thing talking to him, because I was like explaining some of this to him and we were back and forth. And there's other people that have been talking about the sun way before we have as well. And David Wilcock's got a lot of material on it. A lot of people, and now we're actually looking at evidence scientifically that what ended the last ice age was possibly a solar flash that hit Earth. It's hard because I get a lot of people coming to me worried about this. Now, look, we've got to look at things from two perspectives. One is the Earth human perspective. You guys as friends, your families, kids, you know, there's going to be a lot of people possibly perish from this. And it's very sad. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this, but if we look at it on another perspective, multidimensionally, it's like people are worried about if their dogs are going to come with them, or if their pickup truck's going to come with them, or it's like this stuff. Once you go fourth density and up, the stuff that we perceive as limitations and wants, which are different between wants and needs, you no longer even have a yearning for them. It's like when I'm taken to, for example, 5th, 6th, 7th density and upwards, I'm actually perceiving those densities not like 3D. Everything's structured, rainbow iridescent light, sort of like Minecraft a little bit, but like HD, and it's more clearer than here as well. And so what I'm saying is this is an opportunity for an upping in the level of consciousness, and the human perspective needs to be put aside for this to see the bigger implications. Because once this happens for us, and it's not just happening on Earth, it's happening in other places in the universe as well, there are beings that have been held up in their dimension from their process and evolution because of what's going on here, and they get to ascend as well. We're seeing this across the board. It's huge. And this is the thing too, like Shiji, the 7th density version of her, is actually a gatekeeper of the star Merope and the Pleiades. All stars are portals. They're living entities as well, but they're also portals. And I surmise in time what they're going to find is that every single star is connected through maybe an electromagnetic type tunnel, which basically they pop in, and through navigation, through consciousness of their crafts, working with the sun's consciousness or that star's consciousness, which basically puts out like a neuron network throughout the universe. You can navigate. The thing with this, but, is if we look at it in third dimensional physics, we burn up. But when we look at things multidimensionally, what confines us in 3D dimensions, with the hyperdimensional physics of space, things operate differently. So what affects us in 3D, meaning burning up and those sorts of things, doesn't affect beings that are evolved enough to use that type of technology. There are natural portals. There are portals that are artificial as well. But I've been shown portals that can give us access to what I call very advanced realms and places that the beings told me the only way anyone's got access to them is is depending on their level of consciousness. And love is the key to that. It opens you up to the vibration of source, which gives you access to those other realms. But really the biggest portal is within. That is what overrides anything.
Yeah.
And gets into that Merkaba light vehicle place to where you override all that as well. It really just depends on the level of technology and the level of your consciousness to what's going to affect you and what's not.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of these crafts have anti-grav fields. If you're in your Merkaba, it's not even going to matter. Some of these crafts are actually even bigger than our sun. Some of them are the size of our Earth, whether they're cloaked or not. Like those types of technologies, with our current physics that's in the public domain, just people can't comprehend that that's possible, but it is possible. And a lot of our, you know, technologies will allow for that within the secret space program and beyond Black Ops, I'll call it, because they're working with lower type ET technology where they can do some of the similar things to what the ETs are doing because it's the same type of tech. So it's all about perception and what we know, but it's being open-minded that, yeah, there's different facets to every sort of subject and scenario. It's just not black and white. Definitely. And you'll see it's usually there's a spate of things that happen at the same time or following on like a domino effect, a chain reaction. Usually something to do with the sun, the earth reacting, and that can go into volcanic earthquake activity, which then goes into cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons. There's been fires that were shown to me as well. We're now seeing that in Australia. We've got major fires in Australia at the moment on the East Coast, and also in America, in California. I think they're still going as well.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many different floods as well. Like every single thing is connected. There's this, you know, I guess chain reaction of cause and effect going on with all this. And I think the areas to sort of watch out for would be, of course, America on the West Coast, Japan, Italy, Indonesia, those types of places, and New Zealand as well. Australia's pretty safe. We don't get earthquakes, we get earth tremors. Every now and then we might get something hardcore, but we're on one tectonic plate.
Yeah.
So if you get all of America on one plate, but it is surmised by some people that if the plate between New Zealand and Australia shifted, basically the whole East Coast will be wiped out from a massive tsunami because it's just one massive plate. But you know, it's not to be worried about these things going on. Like, of course, if you're out of the cities, you're in a better situation because, like I say to anybody, try to probably be about 3 days, 4 days at least of having backup things if you needed them. Because usually after that, if it's doable again, everything's going to be back up and running. Where if you're in a city, you know, so much potential stuff can happen from riots and everything like that. But especially with the solar flash, I don't think it exactly matters where you go. Like there might be some places in the earth, if it's far enough in, I don't know, if it could reduce the amount of effect of what it could do to the body. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think anyone is safe anywhere. And it all comes down to your level of consciousness in your heart to what's going to be the byproduct for you individually from that. And I don't think it's anything to worry about. It's just, even what I was shown with some of the Earth humans turning into greys, I was told that doesn't happen anymore, but it still does on another timeline. And the Elohim was showing to me, along with Shiji, that because of my linear thinking, I can't perceive that outcome properly. And I'm like, well, how much bloody linear can I get? Then I'm multidimensional half of the time, but still to understand some of these concepts and ideas from their point of view, looking down at me, interacting with me, because I guess, you know, there's still that what we perceive as limitation being human. Because what they have told me is that we're the most advanced beings that exist. Not just in the 3D realm, but any realm. And it's up to us to wake up to that ability because we're actually a conglomerate we're like a super race in the 3D realm, a conglomerate of so many different genetics that our abilities, we can actually do things that even the angelics and Elohim cannot do. They told me that personally. Oh. And they glean stuff from our light body. So everything you do in the physical affects your light body. There's traits and abilities for the earth human experience that they can almost glean into their light body from that and get like a hybridized situation of that which they're gleaning and incorporate it into themselves. Yeah. And so we've got abilities that I don't think we've got an idea about, but I think it's more hardcore than what we can perceive at this time with what they were showing me with what we're actually capable of.